brief visit. During that visit, he gave me information about how the kidnapping took place, what he was used for, and how this prostitution operated in the country, and how they were using young boys, and he was asking for my help in seeing that the men would be arrested. And I tried to convince him during that meeting that it was critical for him to come forward, for him to tell the authorities. And he said, "You don't understand." He said, "My life is in danger." He said, "I can't stay here." I thought he was home to stay at that time. He was not. He was only here for a brief time to try and get some assistance. Directly following that visit, I made an appointment with the county attorney, and I went in and I shared every bit of information, including the names of the individuals that were given to me by my son, with the county attorney. And the county attorney said, "Well, we're not going to do anything with this. We're going to wait for the boy to come in." And he said, we would like to have the boy. And I said, "Well, I don't have the boy. This is the information I was given. That's all I have." And they chose not to work with the information. And the reason I made the appointment with them was so I could never, ever be accused of not sharing vital information on a federal case.
The big question then, Noreen Gosch, was the man who visited you in 1997 now grown up? So now he's 25 years old. 27 years old.
27, 28 when he was here.
Okay, 27, 28. Was that man Jeff Gannon, Jim Guckert?
It was Johnny Gosch. That was the name that he was going by. He was still going by his own name.
His own name, Johnny Gosch. All right, well.
And I saw the birthmark, and it was definitely my son that night in 1997.
Okay, but now he's grown up. When he's kidnapped, he's a boy. He's 12 years old. Now he comes back. He's 27 or 28. He's a grown-up man. Was this man, Johnny Gosch, the same man who now uses the name Jeff Gannon, Jeff Gannon? Noreen Gosch, certainly it would be difficult, even for a mother, to be sure that someone who is 12 years old the last time she saw him is the same man who reappears many years later. But the next time you saw Johnny Gosch, who you knew was Johnny Gosch, he's 27 or 28 years old, was the man who visited you in 1997 briefly, Johnny Gosch, was that the same man we know today as Jeff Gannon, Jim Guckert?
The young man that visited me was Johnny Gosch, my son. I do not know if Jeff Guckert, James Gannon, is my son.
But I mean, you saw what your visitor in 1997 looked like.
Mm-hmm. I did see him.
And you know what Guckert looks like.
The young man, Paul Benassi, who I remain in contact with, about 3.5 years ago, told us that Johnny had had plastic surgery since the visit in 1997. And he had begun shaving his head. Paul Benassi continues to remain in contact with my son. And he told me that his appearance had changed so that you would not readily recognize him like you did in 1997 because some of the facial features were altered. And he said you could stand next to him in a grocery store and it wouldn't be an instant recognition as it was in 1997. I've had many people try to take me to task because they say, well, if you knew your son in 1997, you should know him now. Well, it's two different situations. There has been plastic surgery done on my son. We know this for a fact. In 1997, I had the benefit of having that young man in my home, and I could see the birthmark. I've never been in the same room with Jeff Gannon to even have a closer look other than what's on an internet screen or television screen very briefly. And it's very difficult to make any kind of an ID after plastic surgery under those conditions. That's why, again, I say we have asked for the DNA test.
Now,
that is a responsible thing to do.
In the 1997 visit, Johnny Gosch, your son, told you certain things. He named names that the district attorney there in Des Moines refused to pick up on. What names did he name? Whom did he name?
I am not going to give those out on national or on any kind of radio program or national TV. None of these people have been charged with the crime, and until they are, I can't speak of it. It's part of the situation with the case.
Let me put the question this way. Are these people whose names would be known to everybody? Are they famous people?
There are a few that are involved that there would be name recognition, and then there are others who might not be noted because they have had some local connection within our city who were also a part of this prostitution ring that was very active during the 80s and about halfway through the 1990s.
Are some of them perhaps people in politics on the national level?
It was reported to us by Johnny and by Paul Benassi that very definitely there were high-level politicians and businessmen who had just happened to be pedophiles that enjoyed young boys. And the only difference between a rich pedophile and a poor one, for instance, the poor one in Florida that grabbed Jessica Lundstrom, raped her and killed her, he had to go out and grab his own kid to molest. A rich one doesn't have to do that. They can pay somebody to bring the child to them. And that's how it works. There are rich pedophiles who have the means to do this. And so we have a supply and demand situation concerning the children in our country. And as long as we have people that will pay for the services of a young child, then we're going to have children at risk when they're out playing, delivering papers, riding their bike.
So here you've got a 12-year-old boy. He's a hard-working young man. He's out delivering newspapers for the Des Moines Register. You couldn't imagine anything more innocent, more Norman Rockwellish, if I could say it like that. And suddenly he's snatched right off the street, and you don't see him again.
We had witnesses that morning that saw the man, talked to the man. He drove up as Johnny was on his way to the paper drop where all the kids were, folding their papers. There was a 44-year-old attorney who is now a judge in Des Moines who also pulled up with his car to pick up his son's papers. He saw the man engaging the kids in conversation. My son got scared, and he said to the other kids, "There's something weird about this guy. I'm going to go home." And Johnny started down the street. He was pulling a wagon full of newspapers, and he had our little dog with him. The man who had pulled up right by the paper drop suddenly rolled his feet back in the car. He had opened up the passenger door and put his feet out on the curb, engaging the kids in conversation. He pulled his feet in, slammed the door, started up his car, but before he left the scene, he flicked the dome light on and off 3 times and backed out and drove away at a very fast rate of speed. My son kept walking down the street and turned left.
Hold that thought, if you would. Just hold that thought where your son is walking down the street.